Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at the patch 1.07 notes that just came out for Elden Ring. So this has massive implications for how PvP is played in this game. They've adjusted the damage scaling to be separate for PvP than it is for PvE, which is just huge. This means that they can make tweaks that won't affect the PvE players, and they can make changes that'll really improve the lives of the PvP players. So the first section of this patch is going to talk about the PvP exclusive balance adjustments. So one thing across the board we're seeing is an increase in stamina attacking power against guarded opponents. So this means that you're going to do more stamina damage when somebody's got their shield up, which has been pretty great. I think we've all been looking for that. We've known that great shields are just exceptionally strong, and not being able to poise break people like that has been an issue for a lot of PvPers across the board. Next, we've got an improved poise damage for PvP. So this means that all your weapons' normal attacks, so just like light attacks, are going to be doing more poise damage than before. I think with this patch, we're going to see all the poise breakpoints completely go out the window, and a lot of new calculations are going to need to be found for this, because I think poise has changed significantly in this patch just based on the notes. We're also going to see Ashes of War do less damage across the board, so that's an awesome welcome change. I think everybody got a little bit sick of being one-shot by some Ashes of War, especially like Moonveil or Giant Hunt. Those would just do huge numbers, especially at higher levels. So seeing a decrease there, I think it's a very welcome change. And then we're also going to see a lot of the Dragon Breath incantations nerfed a bit. So I haven't encountered that just in my brief invading this morning, but I think that's a really nice change that we're going to see, because those were extremely strong. We also have another very welcome change when it comes to the strength of the crouch poke. So this has been delayed. The timing has been adjusted for the rolling and crouching attacks associated with ultra great swords. So I know that that's not exactly the change everybody was looking for. I think some people wanted it to be parryable like it was in DS3, but this is still pretty useful since the crouch poke has just been so strong. We also have a general increase in colossal weapons recovery time. So the speed at which you can, do new actions out of a normal swing has been improved, and we're also seeing some increase in attack speeds for colossal weapons. So it doesn't specifically mention colossal swords, so I believe that just colossal weapons as a class is getting a slight buff in terms of increased attack speed. We're also seeing the poise rating for some type of attacks from great swords, colossal swords, curved great swords, great axes, great hammers, great spears, and halberds go up. So this is definitely going to require us to adjust how we think about our poise level and poise rating for our characters when facing those types of weapons. We're also going to be seeing some changes in the amount of poise different armor sets have. So not all armors have been changed by this, but we should likely see more poise for different armor sets, making different mixes and matches of high poise armor sets more plausible. I did check Bullgoat; it's still at 100, so that seems to be the cap. But we are going to see more poise damage from different weapons, so I think this is just kind of an adjustment to allow us to have more variety with armor we wear. We're also seeing a nerf to the fingerprint shield, which now has decreased guard strength, and we're also seeing a decrease in status buildup done by dual-wielded weapons. So that should be really nice for anybody running, like double Sabuku or something. That should no longer do quite as much status buildup. I tend to focus on melee-based builds, so I'm not going to go too far into the details about all the changes to spells and incantations, because there are quite a lot, but I did have some time this morning to invade, just using out all the different changes in Ashes of Wars that we're seeing. I really recommend checking out the patch notes on your own. I'll put a link to them in the description of this video, but there are a lot of changes to different Ashes of War as well as spells and incantations. So it's just going to be something to be aware of moving forward. Timings have changed, poise damage has changed, lots of changes across spells, incantations, and weapon arts. So I'm going to go ahead and just let these invasions play. I tried to mix and match different weapons and Ashes of Wars that have been affected by this patch, and I'll go ahead and talk through that as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions. I start out this first invasion with Lifesteal Fist on some fist weapons, but realize that that's probably not going to be practical in a 3v1, so I switch over to a lance with Spectral Lance on it. This has been adjusted, the Spectral Lance Ash of War, so it now has better damage at longer range. Before, if you were to hit somebody that was further away, you'd do less damage, so that's kind of a cool adjustment. I didn't use it too much, but it will be nice, I think, to try to incorporate that into PvP moving forward. You can also see the crouch poke there comes out more slowly than it would have before this patch, which is really nice to see. I think the rhythm of Ultra Greatsword fights are going to be very different moving forward, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see crouch pokes as much, or if they are used much more as a mix-up than just like a constant spam. I also did get hit with Veil, and you can see there again, it does like a very normal amount of damage. It's not chunking me. It feels like an attack that, you know, is not impractical by any means, but not gonna one-shot you. So I think that has to do with the change to Ashes of War across the board, where they have been nerfed as a whole in PvP, but not changed in PvE. So I think PvPers are going to be very happy with this, and PvEers are not going to care at all, which is great. I also used Loretta's Slash real quick there, and I believe that the timing is much faster for the second part now. So if you do encounter Loretta's Slash or a Winged Scythe, which can take away your ability to heal for a period of time, that's an issue. So just be aware that the timing is different. And then you can see there Endure is different as well, where you can endure through status proc. So I got a bleed proc on, but I had Endure active, so I didn't receive the status proc. I think that's going to be really interesting for Endure moving forward. It's much more practical now, I think, to use that in situations where your opponent is using status procs. In just a moment, I'll switch over to something with Blood Tax. I believe Blood Tax and repeating thrusts have both been improved with this. So I definitely felt that landing this Ash of War and dealing damage with it was much more practical. I think it may be viable in the future. I would love to see new invasion builds with it, and we'll definitely be trying that out on my end. And then Bloody Slash was also adjusted, so I try to land that as well. I'm not really trying to be the best PvP player here. I'm really just trying to showcase these different Ashes of War. But in just a moment you'll see, yeah, Bloody Slash does more damage. It has reduced delay between the end of the animation and your ability to do actions, and it also has increased status buildup, so that's going to be something to be aware of. Bloody Slash is buffed a little bit. It was already pretty strong, so that's good to know. Next up we have a 3v1. You can see Giant Hunt early on. You don't really see too much of the change. It has more poise damage, which I'm not sure why, because you usually get yeeted from it, but it also has faster recovery time afterwards, so that's something to be aware of. You should be able to roll out of Giant Hunt a little bit faster. You can also see I get a backstab there, so I didn't feel any changes to backstabs, at least with the couple that I got just invading this morning, but something to be aware of there with Giant Hunt is it's been buffed slightly in terms of stamina damage, but not necessarily in terms of damage output, since everything has been nerfed in terms of damage output when it comes to Ashes of War. I also switched my Ash of War over to Eruption, which has a couple different changes. The increased range and duration of lava, so that's pretty nice. You'll get a nice big blob of lava that's bigger than before, and then you have a hitbox now when it comes to the sword swing, so if you hit them with your sword, it should do more damage, which is great. And then you also have the timing and poise increase during the activation, so it should come out a little bit faster, and you should be able to tank more stuff. So that's pretty cool. I definitely liked Eruption. It was always kind of a mid-tier Ash of War, but it's nice to see some improvements there. I'd like to see it more viable in PvP. And then I do switch over to Barbaric Roar, which did get a buff. You will see an increase in damage associated with fist weapons, which is nice, and then it was slightly nerfed for Twin Blades. And it reduced the time between using the skill and performing various actions, so that's nice. You should be able to come out of that initial animation a little bit quicker and do more damage with your heavy attacks, especially if you've got fist weapons. This next invasion was one where I lost, but it does have some useful information in it. Phantom Slash got buffed, as well as Viper Bite. So Viper Bite is a pretty cool Ash of War that's only on the Snake Shield. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it does a lot of poison damage now. It does the deadly poison rather than regular poison buildup, so that's pretty cool. That is pretty substantial in terms of a way to pressure your opponents, and I think the ease at which you can get Viper Bite out and the amount of extra poison buildup that it does, you can really damage your opponents over time and use that as a pressuring tool. So I'd like to see that used more often. And then Phantom Slash was also buffed, so you can see I land that there. The main changes to Phantom Slash include improved directional control, so you should be able to land it a little bit more consistently, and then a reduced delay between the animation and other animations you want to perform, so you should be able to roll out of it faster if you need to, which is kind of cool. The rest of this invasion is just me unsuccessfully trying to use Giant Hunt, so I'm going to cut it a little bit short, but in the end I think there's a troll involved and I get killed by 2 different blues, so you're not really missing much. Next up we have kind of a silly invasion where the host ends up with very little health early on, but I don't kill them just because I want to spend as much time invading as possible. But I do land Giant Hunt here. You can see that it does over 700 damage on a level 70 build, so it's still definitely strong. If you don't level your Vigor, you're probably still going to get one-shot by Ashes of War, but you know, it might have done more damage prior to this patch. It's hard to say. So I do leave that guy alone and then run off to find the Phantom and the blue that I know are in here. I put on Flaming Strike, which also got an adjustment. Flaming Strike now has increased attack power, increased duration, and attack power of the fire attribute, so I think we should see the flame lingering just a little bit longer and doing more damage, and then it reduced the delay between the end of the animation and your ability to do different actions. So that's kind of a change that we're seeing fairly consistently, where you're able to get out of your Ash of War animation just a little bit faster. I find this to be a pretty nice change. I, you know, never felt like it was great to be stuck in those animations, but it may affect backstab timing for particular Ashes of War. I'm curious to see how that changes things if backstabs are now harder to get. I do switch over to Ice Spear. This was not changed in the patch, so I quickly switch over to Loretta's Slash, but it's good to be aware of that one should not be very different. And then here with Loretta's Slash, you should see that the timing is a little bit different, so the second part does still feel like it comes out a little bit faster to me, and we'll need to be aware of that moving forward. The host does eventually die to PvE, which makes my job a little bit easier since I'm not sure I would have won that invasion. But next up we have an invasion with Shrek, which was pretty cool. This one was really nice because it was just a 1v1 with somebody that was kind of messing around, so I was able to try out a couple different new Ashes of War. I started out with the Vacuum Slice, and I missed that quite a few times, but eventually I do land it. But still, just seeing the attack animation changes, I think, is helpful. One of them being that it has increased motion speed and range of the blade, so you should be able to perform your attack a little bit faster, and then you should be able to hit from a little bit further away. So that's going to be kind of a nice change for a Vacuum Slice. I never found it to be super useful in invasions, but it does look pretty cool, so making that a little bit more viable I think is nice. It also has reduced FP consumption, so that's going to be good, and then added damage detection for the weapon art. So I believe if you hit with the sword, you'll get a little extra damage rather than if you just hit with the kind of air that comes out of it. I do switch over to Piercing Fang, which does have adjustments. I don't think I landed it, but it does have increased motion speed, attack power, and poise damage. So I'm happy to see a buff for that. I liked it before the patch, and I think I'll like it even more now. It was pretty solid as kind of a delayed ranged attack, and having a little bit more motion speed and attack power is pretty nice. So we'll see if that becomes more viable in PvP moving forward. And then I do switch over to Lifesteal. This was pretty hard for me to land, but I wanted to get it at least once since I knew there were adjustments made to it. So it does have slightly more range and comes out a little bit faster. Personally, I didn't feel like it was any more viable than it was previously. My opponent is using fist weapons, so they are probably ideal to land it on. I realize that I'm getting poise broken before I can finish it out, so I switch over to Bull Goat armor with the hopes that I can just poise through their attacks and finish off the weapon art. It is still a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. I would love for Life Fist Steel to be a little bit better, but it's pretty hard to land. Eventually I do land it, and yeah, I get some health back, and it does a little bit of damage, but super impractical. I'm not sure what the right scenario is for landing that, but it is cool, and I'd love to see it get buffed a little bit more, maybe come out a little bit faster, maybe get a little bit more range. I do switch over to something with Endure again, and you can see as my blood meter gets higher, I don't get staggered by the blood loss, which is just really cool. I think this is going to make status procs a little bit less scary and Endure a little bit more viable. I was using this on a build recently and was definitely frustrated by the amount of stagger damage that you take when you get hit by a status proc. So being able to endure through that is, you know, I think it's what that Ash of War is really about. I do switch back over to Blood Tax and just use that a little bit. I definitely enjoyed using that. I like to see it more. And here I'm just kind of looking through my weapons, seeing what else I have that I haven't used. I switch over to something with Viper Bite again. I believe that I got poison buildup in a single shot. They don't have super optimal armor here, but being able to apply poison, specifically deadly poison, to your opponents in just a single Viper Bite attack really, I think, makes it more of a viable weapon to include in your arsenal, even if it's just a hard swap. I think I'm going to try to use that more often. I do change over to a Colossal weapon since I know that there have been adjustments made specifically to the light attacks for these weapon classes. So you can see my opponent is also using a Colossal weapon and their attacks are coming out a little bit faster. So are mine. I would say I needed to make an adjustment in terms of my roll timing when I first was invading with this person. Normally I'd have a little bit more of reaction time to just dodge their attack, but now that they come out a little bit faster, we're just going to need to make an adjustment with how we roll for these types of things. But I wouldn't say that they're now a super viable weapon class. They're still kind of mediocre just because they're slow and very readable. I would love to see future buffs to this weapon class. I think they're strong and cool, but one-on-one situations don't really make them super practical. So we'll see how that changes in the future, but I would say any buffs to them are pretty nice. And then Spinning Slash also got a buff when it comes to poise damage, which means that we're probably more likely to get our full combo regardless of our opponent's armor. This poise damage increase was only made for great swords, curved great swords, twin blades, great axes, spears, great spears, halberds, and reapers. So a lot of the larger weapons that are pretty practical to have Spinning Slash on. But overall, I would say that this change made by From Software in this patch is great. The difference between PvE and PvP damage scaling is something I'm kind of surprised they didn't do earlier, but is going to be really useful, allowing PvPers to stay happy and PvEers to stay happy without kind of interfering between the two damage outputs. Yeah, eventually this guy is pretty close to death, so am I, and I do get him with a great sword. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this patch. It's pretty cool. We're going to see a lot in the future, and I think it's going to be very positive. If you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody, liking, subscribing, and adding to watch time. All that stuff really helps grow the channel. If you are new to this channel, I do have a lot of invasion content specifically related to non-meta builds, some meta builds as well, but I really like to try out new things and see how practical they are in Elden Ring PvP. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's support. Thanks.